My name is Bobby Porter. I was born on May the 13th, 1929 in Greenville, South Carolina. I have one brother, Larry Porter, and one sister, Carolyn Sutherland. My mother's name was Sarah Bridges Porter. My favorite thing about my mom was she loved her children. She was a good cook. She loved all of her grandchildren. She was just a good mom. My father's name was Marion Japhus Porter. My dad was a hard-working man that looked after his family. He carried us to church and just looked after our well-being. I grew up in Greenville. I lived in the American Spinning Mill Village on Gridley Street. It was a four-room house, had a nice porch on the front and plenty of shade, and I went to grammar school there. Had a real good childhood there. My favorite memory about growing up was my daddy always claimed he saved me from being stupid. I found out when I was in first grade that I could cry a little bit. My mama would make me go to school. And one day he come home from work and I didn't go to school that day. So he gave me a choice of going to school or taking a whipping. So I decided I'd go to school. I got about halfway there and I turned around and went back home. So he got me by the hand and he whipped me every step of the way between there and the school. Opened the door and just shoved me in the door. And he always claimed he saved me from being stupid. When I was a kid, we lived across the street from the school playground. And we didn't have TV. We didn't even have a radio, I don't think. So all we did was play in the schoolyard. So we played baseball all day. When I was about 12 years old, they had leagues for the kids. They called it Barefoot League, because we didn't have baseball shoes. And I played in it, and I did real well. The next year, I went out for the American Legion team, and I made it at 14 years old. Played with the American Legion for 3 years. They had a baseball game like the Shrine Bowl football game at North Carolina and South Carolina, and I made that South Carolina All-Star team 3 years. So I was doing pretty good, and I graduated on into textile baseball. And one of my fondest memories was one day we got into a real tight ball game. Both pitchers was real good. And in the first inning, I scored a run, and then about the 8th inning, they scored a run and tied the game up, and we played 16 innings. And in the 16th inning, I hit a home run to win the ball game. And it wasn't no great big crowd, but they passed the hat around, and people put money in the hat for me for hitting that home run. And about 10 years later, one old gentleman that was there at that ball game asked me one day, he said, "You remember that day you hit that home run in that 16-inning ball game?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "They passed that hat around, and all I had in my pocket was a silver dollar that was made the year I was born. And I put that silver dollar in that hat." I said, "I have that silver dollar at home." He said, "Would you please let me have it back?" He said, "I cannot find one made in that year." So I carried it back, and he gave me $1 for it. One other memory was my granddaddy was in his 90s, lived over in Easley, South Carolina, and we went over there to play them one night. And they had a guy pitching for them that was in the Air Force down at Sumter Air Force Base, and he was extremely good. My wife was sitting with my granddaddy, and first time up, I got a 2-base hit off of him. My granddaddy told Cat that I was lucky. Later in the ball game, I hit one over the center field fence, and that was a thrill. And 2 years later, this guy was pitching for the Yankees, so that made it that much better. I met my wife, Cat. Me and a friend of mine were just riding around one night. He carried me by her house, and that's when I met her. Later, I saw her at work. Had to go down to the supply room and get something, and she was working right next to the supply room. I don't remember what I had, but she was putting spools of thread into this loom, and she dropped one, and she bent over to pick it up. And when she did, I hit her with whatever I had in my hand, and she come up swinging, and she smacked my face. I would see her around, and one day I was out at Pine Grove swimming pool, sitting there minding my own business on the edge of the water, and the next thing I knowed, somebody had shoved me out into the water, and I turned around, it was her standing there laughing. That was before I knew her good enough that we started dating. I went in the Army and stayed a couple of months. I come out. Somebody called my house and said it was Cat White, and she always declared it wasn't her. So I called her, and from that phone call, we started dating. She had a boyfriend, and one day she was riding around in his car, and I called her, and she got his car, and I met her over at Parker High School in the parking lot. We started dating from there. I guess we had been dating about 6 months. I realized that she was the one for me. We dated every night. We just enjoyed being around one another, and after about a year and a half, we were sitting in the car out in front of her mother's house. I asked her if she would marry me, and we got married on June 28th, 1952. I didn't have any money. She got a vacation check from where she working, and we took that vacation check and went to Daytona, stayed down at a hotel across the street from the beach. We stayed there 6 days, and the hotel bill was $24. We got up and left about 6 o'clock that morning, and there was nobody on the front desk, and I put $24 in an envelope and put my name on it and left it laying on the desk. Later in that week after we got home, I got a letter from them. I forgot to pay the tax. Tax was $1 and something, so I mailed them $1 and something back, paid the taxes. I can't believe it. We just paid $24 for a week in Daytona. The first house we lived in, her and her mother was living in a 3-room apartment, and I moved in with them. We were able to save one of our paychecks every week, and we lived there about 9 months, and we bought a new house on Callahan Avenue in Greenville. It was a little small 3-bedroom house, had a floor furnace. Never had anything like that. Always had an oil stove or something sitting up in the floor. Jean and Tony both were born in that house. And one of the funniest things I remember in that house, we had a nice yard to play in. One day I found some matches in Tony's pocket. I said, "Boy, where did you get these matches?" And he said, "Well, I was out in the front yard and I was running and sliding, and I guess they just slid up in my pocket." My daddy said, "Did you whip him?" I said, "No, I didn't whip him, not for a lie like that." Then we needed a bigger house, and we moved up on McKinney Road. We moved there, and we had plenty of room. We had a nice big driveway, and the children enjoyed that driveway. Riding Hot Wheels and cars I made. That's about the best memories from that. One of the biggest things I remember about her was she didn't let anybody mess with her children. And we moved in that new house, in that new neighborhood, and the boys in that neighborhood wanted to test Tony out. And the lady called in, told Cat that 3 boys was fighting Tony out in her backyard. She said, "They not hurting him." Well, she took off home, and of course, the time she got home, the fight was over. So she got him, and they walked around that circle there. She made him go knock on the door of every one of them little boys and try to get him to come out there and fight him one-on-one, and none of them wouldn't do it. But he gained a respect from all the boys in that neighborhood then, that they didn't mess with him anymore. She was just teaching him how to take care of himself. One day this neighbor came and claimed Tony stole the Matic handle out of the back of his truck and made a sail for a boat. And I asked Tony if he did it, and he said, "Well, he didn't get it out of his truck, he got it out of the ditch." Told the man to go buy him one, and I'd pay for it, for Tony to stay out of his yard. One day Tony was walking along the edge of the lake, And his mama stuck her head out the window and told him, his daddy told him to stay out of her yard, that you get out of my yard. So Tony decided to keep that kid in his yard. And every time he'd see Tony coming, he'd run in his yard because he knew Tony was going to get him. And one day the ice cream truck come by. The boy was sitting out in the street, had one hand on the handlebar of his bicycle and taking a bite of his ice cream when Tony hit him. And his daddy tried his best to pay one of them other boys to fight Tony, and none of them wouldn't do it. The other thing I remember about her was how smart she was. In our little laundry down there, we were doing about 3,000 white shirts a week. And one guy called and said that one of his customers brought 5 and he didn't get but 4 back. And she didn't hesitate. She said no, he didn't have but 4. He had a blue one, a green one, a yellow one. She remembered the 4 shirts and what color they were, and he told her to look on the book. She said, I don't have to look on the book. So he come over there. He said, I want to look on the book. He looked on the book and he said, okay, Einstein. But it was just amazing that she could remember that one guy's shirts out of all of them that had gone through there that week. She was just good like that. She was a very good cook. When we got married, she could not cook anything, but she learned fast and she could out-cook just about anybody. And she enjoyed cooking. She'd let me sit there and watch TV and she'd cook. And Tony always amazed that she could cook 3 different things at one time and not burn any of them. And she was just a real good cook. Right after we got married, we started bowling, and we got to go a little bit regular, and they talked us into get into a league. So we started bowling in a mixed league, husband and wife. We bowled in leagues for years, and she was a good bowler. We were married 63 years and never fussed. We had disagreements, but we talked them out. We talked about it. As feisty as she was, she never raised her voice at me, not ever. And there's plenty of times that she should have. I'd go to the golf course and I didn't know when to go home. And she was just easy to get along with. Working together for all those years at the cleaners, there was guys that come in there and flirted with her, and there was women come in there that flirted with me, but we were not jealous. So we didn't have any problems like that. I know the guy that she met me with in his car, he never gave up on her. And one time, years and years later, we were at church, and this little girl, she must have been 12 years old, come up to her and said, my grandma said that you were supposed to be my mama. And it was that guy's daughter. I forget what she told her, but she explained it to her. Long there right before she died, and we go to bed at night, and she'd reach and get my hand, and we'd tell each other we loved them. She was just the love of my life, and I guess I was to her. It just proves that you can live a long time and not fuss. To be married 63 years, I think you should have patience with one another and not to fuss in front of your children. Just talk things out. Not get real mad at one another. That's what we did. We never got real mad at one another, never. And that's the best advice I got. We were real excited when we were going to have our first child, and back in those days you didn't know what they were till they got here. Jean was born, and we were all excited. She was the first grandchild in our family. And I remember going home and laying there thinking, boy, just think, me a daddy. I couldn't believe I was a daddy. Jean being first, she was a very pretty baby, and she was a pretty little girl, and everybody spoiled her. Bill White would tell her, today's your birthday, you can do anything you want to. She was just a joy. When Tony was born, I sat out there in the waiting room. It emptied, it filled back up, and there I sit. And finally the doctor come in there and said, well, you got yourself a little boy. I said, you ain't so darn hot. And he didn't even weigh 7 pounds. He weighed 6 pounds, 15 and a half ounces. I just always remembered that my crazy aunt doctor was. When Todd was born, I was already 40. 2 weeks after he was born, Kat was 40, and we just couldn't imagine having a baby at us 40. But I always think the Lord sent him to straighten me out. Todd started on me as soon as he got big enough. I guess he was 4 years old, maybe 5. He liked to worry me to death. I was smoking. Every time I'd light a cigarette, he said, "Daddy, when you gonna quit? You gonna have cancer and you gonna die. When you gonna quit?" He liked to worry me to death. And this went on for months. Finally, one day I picked him up at my mother's house, and I had one cigarette. As soon as we got to the truck, I lit it up, and he started, "Daddy, when you gonna quit? You gonna have cancer. You gonna die." And I said, "Well, this is the last one I had. I won't stop up here and buy any." He said, "I know, but are you gonna quit?" I said, "Well, I said I wasn't gonna stop and buy any." He said, "I know, but are you gonna quit?" He made me promise him that I would quit. And if I hadn't have promised him, I never would have quit. We started going to church, and I'd get up early at 8 o'clock and go to golf course, and they would go to church. So he got to where on Sunday morning he'd get up and he'd start crying, "I want to go with my daddy, I want to go with my daddy." And he had me going to the golf course earlier and earlier. Finally, I just give up and started going to church with him. So I just always thought the Lord give us Todd to straighten me out, because it got me in church. He made me quit smoking. If I hadn't quit smoking, I'd been dead years ago. All 3 of my children were good. Tony was a little bit of a roughneck, but he was good, and all 3 of them were good. I love my grandkids. All of them know I love them. Christy started me buying Hot Wheels, and I buy them Hot Wheels and put them together. I remember the first one I bought. Started to go to Kmart, and she said, "No, all they got out there is G.I. Joes. I don't want a G.I. Joe." So she told me where to go to get it, and I got it, and we got it, put it in the car. She got in the back seat with it, and she opened it up, and she said, "Who tore it up?" And I said, "Well, we got to put it together." She said, "You can't put it together." So we got home and put it together, and I got down to the last piece, pedal, and I put that pedal on backwards. And she said, "See there, I told you couldn't." I just enjoyed playing golf. I was sorry I didn't start younger, and I played at least 3 times a week. After I retired and I was hanging around down at Thomas Helm house, we had a group in there, there'd be 18, 20 of us go play. I enjoyed that. When I was 77, I had a real good day, and I shot a 76. Not too many people shoot their age. My favorite golf story concerned Justin. We played golf one day, and he rode in the golf cart with us. I don't remember if we let him drive any or not, but we got to the last hole, and the last hole was right in behind the clubhouse, right next to the 18th green, and the house was a driving range. And somebody had left about a half a bucket of balls laying up there, and while we were putting on the 18th green, I told Justin, "Get one of my clubs and go hit those golf balls." And he did. He went up there and he was hitting those golf balls. And we got through putting, and come find out my golf club had slipped out of his hand and went way down the fairway and up in the top of a tree. And it must be the world's record for slinging a golf club. And we had to take my golf club, when Grady was throwing one of his, throw it up in the tree to knock that golf club loose, because nobody could climb up there where it was. And I told Justin to go sit in the cart. And after it was all over with, it was funny. Me and Donna started going to church. When we got married, she was a member of Church of God, and I was a member of the Methodist Church. And that wasn't going to be no problem. I was going to go with her, and she was going to go with me. Except after we got married, she would go with me, but I wouldn't go with her. And we wound up, we didn't go. For several years, we didn't go. Tony and Jean would go with my mom and dad to the Methodist church, and my dad never tended to my business. Once I got married, he never opened his mouth to me about anything about my business. But he told me one day, he said, you don't need to be sending these children to church. You need to be taking them to church. Well, it wasn't too long after that, Kat started going to church, taking Todd and going to church on Wednesday nights at the Church of God over there in Berea. And it wasn't long till Tony started going. Tony got saved. It was just a matter of time between Todd getting on to me about going to the golf course that I started going with them. Like I told a fellow one night, if you walk along the edge of the creek bank, you'll slide in somewhere along the way. We would go to church, and Todd would sit in my lap, and I'd sit there and squeeze him and keep from going to the altar. One night we went to Columbia to a Jimmy Swaggart concert, and it was during that meeting that I got saved. I didn't go down to the altar down there, but I got saved. So I started going to church with them regular. I went to the altar there at that church after that. And I got started going regular and enjoyed it. And it wasn't long till I was superintendent of Sunday school. So I got involved, and I've been involved ever since, up until recent, in all capacities in the church. My hardest moment in life had to be when my wife come down with Alzheimer's. To watch her go through it, she hated not to be able to do anything. She would get her knitting out and try to knit, and she didn't remember how anymore, and it just frustrated her. She didn't say anything. She never complained. She didn't complain the whole time. It just hurt me to sit there and watch her not being able to do anything. One night we were sitting there. She said, "Where's Bob?" And I said, "Bob who?" And she said, "Bob Porter. Where is he?" I said, "That's me." I said, "Why you want him?" She said, "'Cause he's good to me." And it was later that I asked her who I was, and she couldn't think of my name. She said, "You my heart." And it about broke mine. The greatest accomplishment in my life was my children and my family. I've always told everybody that the Lord didn't bless me with money, He blessed me with family. My neighbors right now tell me, they say, "You got the best children they are. You don't know how fortunate you are that your children are looking after you the way you are." So that's my greatest accomplishment with my children.